Hey there. It is so good to see you. Somebody give me a hello in the chat box so we can make sure that our tech is working. Change that. Hello. There we go. Hi, Marie. It's good to see you. It's nice to see some familiar names here tonight and some new people that I haven't seen either in a while or in a very long time or never before. Welcome. Um, I'm going to just remind you that, especially if you watch this on the replay, to like the video, drop a comment, share it, and do subscribe to my channel. It helps my channel to be more visible, which means more people see it, and that's a good thing. Alrighty, so a brief introduction. My name is Judith Cobb. I am a master herbalist, natural nutrition clinical practitioner, and a level 3 IPA certified iridology instructor. I've been a holistic wellness coach since 1981 and a holistic wellness instructor since 1985. You do the math. I specialize in teaching health professionals who already have anatomy and physiology under their belt. And I specialize in teaching them the science and art of iridology. So if that sounds like what you signed up for tonight, was to learn something about science, give me a wave in the chat box so that you know you're in the right place. And if you don't know how to do an emoji, just say hi. Just let me know you're here, that you're awake, that you've got a pulse. And I hope I'm not keeping you away from dinner tonight. There we go. Tamara, ooh, lots of big things. Good job. Tessa, Phyllis, good to see you. McKenna, yeah, so good, so good. Okay, welcome. So good to have you. It's not going to be an overly long mini class today. We're going to be really focused and really concise. So stay with me here. Iridology is an assessment tool with its roots in ancient cultures like Egypt, China, Greece, and India. Much like pulse assessment from Ayurveda and from traditional Chinese medicine, and tongue assessment and facial diagnosis and even fingernail assessment, it's very similar to them, but in that it's an assessment tool. All of these things are assessment tools. Unlike those assessment techniques, however, the iris assessment part of iridology, and I say that because in iridology, we also include a pupillary assessment and a sclera assessment nowadays. Yes, iridology has grown in the last several decades. But what we know now is the iris assessment part of iridology does not focus on what's going on now, but instead it teaches us about inherent predispositions. Right? Think of this as a way of assessing epigenetics in general. Where are the strengths and where are the weaknesses inherently? Okay, so while we're thinking about that, I want you to layer that up with some other information. When we couple that information with the client's symptoms, we gain a deeper understanding of why he or she has the symptoms. When we layer that up with family history, we get an even deeper understanding. So whenever we work with a client, the very first thing we want to know is, what would you like my help with? And they give us this shopping list of all these things. Sometimes they only give us one thing, but as we continue working through that hour together, the list grows, right? We unearth things, we extract things here. And when we know what the symptoms are, then because we know anatomy and physiology, we start to do that and connect things in our brain of where the problems could be, what organs are likely involved before we get to the symptom. And then we're going to look at the eyes to understand the epigenetics of what's going on that got us to the symptom. Does that make sense? Let me know in the chat box if that makes sense. Just give me a make sense in the chat box if that makes sense, that we want to know. Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. We're getting there. Yes, very good, excellent. Okay. So what I'm going to share with you tonight is a part of one of the lessons from the 50-hour course I teach called Dynamic Iridology Assessment System for Health Professionals. Okay, so this is literally, I took these slides right out of one of the class sessions. Pigment refers to any color that is different from the base color of the iris. So as we look at this iris, our base color is a steel blue gray. We've got yellows and dark rusty brown, or dark rusty colors, and really dark browns in here. Lots of that dirty yellow color in here. So these are all pigments of various types and in various concentrations. An iris can have no pigments at all, or it can have many pigments. And when we say many pigments, it can have lots of freckles that are all the same color, or it can have freckles with lots of different colors. Pigments can be yellow, orange, dirty orange, brown, rust, red, tarry black. Most of the time, a person will have one color family of pigment. For example, their pigments will all be in the brown tones. They won't have any yellow, they won't have any orange, they won't have any black, they won't have any red, they'll just have brown. But that doesn't mean that's always the case. Right? People can have a wide palette of colors in the pigments, and we kind of see that here. We've got the oranges, and we've got the darker browns, and we've got the really dark brown, almost black, but not quite. The idea that pigments are the result of toxic exposure. Has anyone heard that pigments are the result of toxic exposure? If you have, give me toxic in the chat box. Okay. The idea that pigments came from toxic exposure came from an early researcher. His name was Pastor Nil Lilliquist in the late 1800s. Now, we're not slamming Pastor Lilliquist for this at all. He was one of the research pioneers. And so he had to create theories and then work to try to prove or disprove them, right? That's how science develops things. That's how we get somewhere here. And so his theory that these pigments were because of toxic exposure was published, but it was published as a theory. And everybody glommed onto it as if it was gospel true, cast in stone, proven without a doubt, but it hadn't been yet. And now we know from more decades of research that these pigments are not caused by toxic exposure. Is that a little bit mind-boggling for anybody? If it is, give me mind in the chat box. And if it is, that's fine. Because what we're trying to do is give you good information, not perpetuate myths that are going nowhere, right? Yeah, fantastic. So it is really important to remember that pigments are not the result of toxic exposure. They are an indication of epigenetic potential. Let me repeat that. They are an indication of epigenetic potential. They show us where the body could run into trouble if care is not taken. 9 is going, wow. Yeah, wow. Wow, right? When I first learned iridology, I was taught that pigments were the result of toxic exposure. I was taught if we fasted, if we cleansed, if we took the right herbs, if we changed the food we ate, we could get rid of pigments. And I fasted and I cleansed and I changed the food I ate. And I still have the same pigments I had 45 years ago. Okay. And so we do not fast, cleanse, or in any way erase these pigments. Here's another bit of a mind blow for you. I hope you're sitting and got your seatbelt buckled in so you don't go boom. Pigments may and often do surface over time. Again, this is under the influence of genetics. We know so much more now about epigenetics, right? And how we're born with this set of genes and we can turn them on and we can turn them off. Something that turns one gene on might turn another gene off, right? And that's what we're looking at here is epigenetics. So I'm going to put this into a personal perspective. My hair hasn't always had gray in it. That was epigenetics that cued. There's this time range when your hair's going to start turning gray, and by this age, it'll be mostly gray, right? That's epigenetics. And so we're going to look at an example of pigment development in just a few minutes. But again, when pigments become obvious over time, it's not from toxic exposure. It's because of genetic cueing, and it's the eyes, it's the body showing us that the body wants to have a problem in this area if we're not careful. And it may be having a problem in that area because things may not have been cared for well enough. All right. All right. So sometimes when I'm teaching iridology, my students will say, oh, those hematogenic eyes, they are so hard to read. You can't see anything in them. They are so dark. Any of you, first off, how many of you have some iridology experience? If you do, just give me iridology or iris in the chat box. Let me know if you've got some experience, some training under your belt. And if you do have some training under your belt, do you find that dark brown eyes are more difficult to assess? Chessa says, I took a course in school, not sure it counts. Okay, just started, said Phyllis. Phyllis is one of my students in the new cohort. So good to see her here. Jesus says, iris, excellent. So we've got a few people. A lot of people do say that a dark hematogenic eye, hematogenic is what we call a dark brown eye, or a brown eye rather, is more difficult to read. But I want you to look really, really closely. See that right there? Can you see that little dark spot that my pointer is pointing to? If you can see it, just put I see in the chat box. Little tiny dark spot. Yes, Nina, fantastic. And Marie sees it too. Excellent. This is good. This is very good. That is a brown pigment in a hematogenic eye. So we can see things in hematogenic eyes. Sometimes we need to play with our lighting a little bit. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today too. But this gives us even more information about this person. It's one tiny little pigment. What I want you to keep in mind is that it's the small things that run the show. Okay. The baby runs the house. If you've had a baby, a newborn baby, you know the baby runs the house. The grain of sand in your shoe makes walking miserable. It's the little things, and that goes for pigments as well. All right, so let's look at an example of pigment accumulation. Now you're going to look at these eyes and go, those aren't the same eyes. This is such an important point when we're talking about pigment, and that is that your camera and your lighting make all the difference in the world. You cannot use two separate cameras or the same camera with different lighting and get what we would call before and after pictures, right? It doesn't work. If you know the scientific process, and that is you control all the parameters and variables except for one. So let's decide that this is the same eye. How would we do that? Well, we're going to look right here, and that marking is here. These cameras are both handheld, so they're not completely on the level. We have this, that's right here. We have this, and it's right here. So we've got this little area right here, and that is sitting right here. Do we agree that these are the same iris? If you do, give me an I agree in the chat box. Let me know that you are on board with me here. Fantastic. Tessa agrees. Thank you, Tessa. Really appreciate you playing with me in the sandbox here. This picture, these pictures were taken 20 years apart. This was a print film camera with an incandescent flash, and I was shooting Kodak film. This is a 24 megapixel digital camera with an LED flash. Okay, and so the technology makes the difference. You will see all kinds of people online posting pictures like this. They'll put one of them first and the other one second, and they'll say, oh, look at the difference in my eyes. Look at the difference in my eyes. And I go, no, look at the difference in the camera, right? So now that we've ascertained that these are the same eye, and we understand that I am not saying that we've changed iris color, what I want you to look for is the one obvious difference between these photos that we can't account for because of technology. And that is this pigment that is here. This pigment is dark enough that had it been present 20 years previous, it would show up here. So this is telling us that over these 20 years, from the age of about 40 to the age of about 60, this gentleman has an organ that is saying, yeah, I want to make life challenging. I think I'm going to cause a problem for you. And I'm just going to see if you pay attention to me, right? And so when we see this, because this is in a dark brown, this is in the dark brown range, we know exactly what it means. And because of where it's sitting in the eye, we know the impact it wants to have in his body. Okay. And that's important because when we understand that, then we can support the organ that wants to cause problems, and we can support the organ that is receiving the brunt of those issues. Now, I've never seen or documented pigment disappearing. I have many files in my repertoire of slides and photos now where I've done photos 20 years apart, mostly because I have a lot of kids and I've taken their photos over the 20 years. And I've got documentations of pigments building over time. All right. Whether this person is going to have problems because of this pigment depends largely on what this person is doing for his health. If he is doing a junk food diet, I will guarantee he will have problems. And I can guess what kinds of problems they might be because of the organ that causes the imbalance and the organ that is receiving the pressure of that imbalance. Now, today we're only going to focus on the brown pigment because we don't have time to do yellow, orange, dirty orange, black. We just don't have time to do them all. And that is an entire lesson in the dynamic iridology course. So let's look at brown. Let's look at brown. Nina, I love that you keep saying, wow. Sounds to me like you are learning some things, challenging beliefs, picking up new information and moving forward. I love that. I love that. That is so, so amazing. That is what makes a holistic practitioner a good holistic practitioner. I could have stayed with what I learned in iridology 45 years ago. I could have. And there's many people that are still practicing that style of iridology. But I recognized when I saw the constitutional style that it was new, that it was well researched, and that it would take iridology forward rather than keeping us stuck in stop. Okay, so pigment. Again, pigment gives us two pieces of information, and it doesn't matter whether it's a more concentrated freckle or whether it's more of a wash or whether it's a little bit of a blobby thing. Pigment is pigment. The color tells us the organ of origin. So which organ wants to have an imbalance, which organ wants to be the troublemaker. And the placement of the pigment tells us which organ is going to receive the brunt of that trouble. Now, I want to back that bus up just a little bit because some eyes are plastered with freckles. That does not mean we need to look at each and every individual freckle and assign a problem to it. In that case, we take a step back. We look at all the freckles together and we say, well, we know what organ wants to cause problems and we know the problems it can create. So rather than going after every organ that will need support because of one organ being out of balance, doesn't it make more sense to go after the organ that's out of balance? Right? So brown. Brown specifically tells us that the liver wants to be a troublemaker. Now, whether it is actually causing problems or not can only be ascertained by asking our client questions. We need to understand their symptoms. We might need to review lab tests as well. This is where having a solid understanding of anatomy and physiology comes in. Little sidebar, it blows my mind when people think they can do iridology and be a health coach and they don't know how the body works. Like, How does that even work? I don't know. If that's you, get an anatomy and physiology course. If you need one, let me know, and I will send you a link to the course that I send all of my prospective students to if they don't already have A and P. So how many things do you know of that the liver does? I want to see estimates in the chat box. And maybe you know, maybe you've recently done an anatomy course and you know, how many different jobs does the liver do? Anyone else want to guess? We've got Tessa saying 500. We've got Marie saying 200. We've got Phyllis taking the easy way out. Phyllis, many. 600. Good. I like a solid number. Annabella says over 500. I love this. Yay, Phyllis, for taking that stance and put a number in there. That is so good. Yeah, it is somewhere over 500. I don't want to count them all. Somewhere over 500. So with that, what are some of the symptoms? No, let's rephrase that. Let's list some of the things the liver does. What are some of the things the liver does? I want you to drop those in the chat box here. It breaks down hormones and carbs. Yeah, it does. It does. What does it do with them once it breaks them down? Let's focus on maybe hormones. That's an easier one. When we've broken down the hormones, what does it do with them? I'm actually working on creating a course for my dynamic iridology graduates on the liver and iridology, where we're going to spend like probably 24 hours diving deep. It detoxes. Yep, it detoxes. That's a part of it. Okay. It resorbs some things. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it resorbs some nutrients that we need. It recycles them. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So this shows you how important anatomy and physiology is. When it breaks down a hormone, that's a two-phase process. First, it breaks it down into something that's not usable by the body, maybe not terribly harmful, but then it has to grab that in a second process to break it down into something water soluble so it can put it back into the blood so the kidneys can remove it. All right. It takes urea from the blood, breaks that down, puts it back into the blood so the kidneys can create urine. It grabs amino acids and it creates all the different proteins your body needs to repair tissue. Okay. It stores iron. It has huge roles as far as our immune system goes. Your liver has the largest and heaviest concentration of macrophages to digest things that don't belong there. It produces bile. Absolutely. That's another great one. It produces bile. And that then helps with the emulsion of fats so that we can absorb fat soluble nutrients. It converts vitamin D. Annabella, good job. Excellent. Yeah. Look, we're on a roll now. We're on a roll. So the liver does all of these things. And that's important because now when we look at an eye like this and we see these pigments, there's only 3 of them. We don't know if there's any more down here, but we've got 3 for sure. And when we use a good iridology map and we see where these are, we know where our client has the symptoms, what the symptoms are. We understand some of those pathways of what usually creates those symptoms. And then we can ascertain, is the liver involved in any of those pathways? Are the organs that the liver wants to impact involved in any of those pathways? Right? So we're not just throwing band-aids at the problem. We're using the pigments to help us understand what the foundations of the problem are so that we can actually create a positive effect and get this person's health coming around the right way. How does that sound? Does that sound powerful? Does that sound exciting? Does that sound like something you want to do? And Marie says, amazing. Yes, absolutely. So, and McKenna's going, wahoo, I love that. Love that. Love the energy here. So in truth, if the liver isn't working well, it can affect any other organ and organ system, right? It literally can, because it does 500 different jobs. So you have to be able to correlate the symptoms with the possible root of the problem in order to make sound recommendations, right? I really appreciate what my constitutional iridology teacher, Bill Cardona, taught me over 30 years ago, actually almost 35. Can't believe it's been that long. He taught me the irides don't give us answers. They teach us what questions to ask. Iridology is the art, again, of combining symptoms with what we see in the eyes to teach us what questions we need to ask to get to the root of the issue. So here we have another beautiful example of a very dark brown, it's not even rust, dark brown pigment with a rust colored pigment right beside it. These are both sitting in the kidney region. So let's just find out for a minute, what are some symptoms that you might see if the liver is unhappy? What are some symptoms you might see if the liver is unhappy? Yeah, I'm going to make you dig here, folks. Tired, nausea, yeah. Angry, oh, angry is a good one. Jaundice, yes, Phyllis. Sluggish, yeah. Did I miss any? Bloating, jaundice, excellent, excellent. Pain, yeah, they might even have the upper abdominal pain if that liver is really inflamed, right? Excellent. Those are all excellent understandings. Blood sugar problems. Oh, yeah, Marie. Yeah. Dark hand spots. Yeah. Actually, dark spots anywhere on the body, dark pigments surfacing. Yeah, that can be it too. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now what are some symptoms of the kidneys not being happy? What do you see if the kidneys aren't happy? Could be dark urine. Mm-hmm. Kidney stones, fluid retention. Yeah. Mm-hmm. These are good. These are really good. You might see pain again. You might have the low backache now, right? Absolutely. Foam in the urine. Yeah. Fluid retention. Have I missed any here? Burning on urination. Yeah, that would be probably a bladder problem, like a bladder infection. Lack of energy. Excellent. Good work. Good work. So now we need to combine skin color changes. Yes, and that would, of course, be even stronger with the liver. What we need to do now is combine the two. How do the kidneys and the liver cross paths? Where's that commonality? You know, another indication of kidney problems is blood pressure, elevated blood pressure, right? So when we see the liver and the kidneys crossing paths, remember the liver actually takes urea in the blood and breaks it down into components that the kidneys can extract. So if we are seeing a kidney symptom and we have liver pigment sitting right here, maybe the first thing we need to do is support the liver. Get it breaking things down better so the kidneys can have an easier time doing their job. Could that be a possible way to address this? Right? It might be, right? It might be something to try. You give it a try for a few weeks, see if it works. That's what I would do first, is I would go after that liver in this case because of where the pigment is sitting. This client may or may not have issues. She may be doing many things well that are keeping the liver and the kidneys happy, in which case the pigment is simply showing us where the issues could arise. Think of it as a warning for her to behave herself. Now, Blanca is asking a great question. What about a liver cleanse? Liver cleanse, possibly. Gallbladder flush, almost never. Okay. The reason I say that is because 9 times out of 10, people don't know they have gallstones. And if we do a gallbladder flush and they have a gallstone they didn't know about, that stone can be released. And yes, a lot of people pass gallstones, but it can also get stuck somewhere in the bile duct or in the common bile duct. And if it does, we've got an emergency surgery situation on our hands. So if I was going to do a liver cleanse here, I would be very careful to not do anything that was going to trigger the gallbladder. Right. I actually personally, usually in a situation like that, would prefer to use foods rather than supplements. Right. I'll go after my liver foods to get that liver, to support the liver and get it humming along a little bit better. Or if I'm going to use herbs, I want to make sure they're not going to touch that gallbladder, just in case, right? I'm going to want them to get an ultrasound before I think about a gallbladder flush. Can you still do a liver cleanse with no gallbladder? Sorry. Yeah, you can. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the liver and the gallbladder are two separate organs. So you can. But again, you need to know what you're doing, right? I don't like it that people just launch out and do cleanses because, they saw it advertised on various different Facebook pages. That just drives me crazy. Just drives me crazy because you got to know a little bit about what you're doing here. All right. So is this making sense that with where these pigments are placed, even if there is a kidney symptom, I actually want to work with the liver first, get to the root of the problem first? That making sense? Okay. Now this is how I teach iridology. I introduce a concept, and then I get you to show me how you would integrate it. I want to know how this integrates with what you do. Okay. And that's the only way it makes sense to learn iridology. Too many teachers will teach you brown pigment. Brown pigment means liver. And then they'll give you an iridology map and they'll say you figure it out. But I find that sometimes, and I don't know if it's because many of my students are not just fresh out of university, but many of them need to be shown options for ways to think things through. And that's where, we ask, what do you know about the liver? Well, what do you know about the kidneys? How would you work with this? And in class, we go even further than that. We would ask, what do you know about nutrition? What do you know about supplements? Blanca is asking steps first, liver cleanse, then a kidney cleanse. What about colon cleanse? Which one would be first? It'll depend entirely on the individual. This is why I don't give blanket protocols ever, because I don't know how this person's bowels functions. I don't know how their kidneys function. I don't know how their liver is functioning until I've spoken with them and I've looked at their eyes and I've done an intake. I know what other health symptoms they've got. I know if they've got medications. I know if they've had any surgeries. I know a bit about their lifestyle. Now I'm going to craft my recommendations based on that individual and all the information I've gathered. Okay, ask about diet and their whole lifestyle. Absolutely. You've got to know that. I know there's a lot of people online. I just watched one the other day, looking at a photo that somebody had sent in and just saying, you need to do this, 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 and this without even asking anything about the person, just telling them from the eyes. And I'm just shaking my head and going, oh my goodness, you have no information about this person and you're giving that kind of recommendations. Oh my goodness. It was a little scary. So sometimes the pigment is a freckle. Sometimes it's a wash like this, where it's kind of just all smeared, but the same process applies here. We want to consider the color of the pigment and the placement of the pigment. Blanca says, can we see that image, the one you got impressed? I don't know what you're referring to, Blanca. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Sorry. Maybe you can explain it a little bit more. At any rate, so here, again, we would look at the color of the pigment and ascertain, do we think this is orange or do we think this is brown? And then we look at where it's placed, and then we refer to our iris map. And that helps us to understand, again, the color shows us which organ wants to be out of balance. The placement tells us which organ it's going to have an impact on. And then we correlate that with symptoms. And now we know what direction we want to take as we ask the client more about diet and lifestyle and things like that. And we can create our program from there. And we can create it very quickly. It takes me about 5 minutes to do an iris assessment and about 5 minutes to create a program. And the rest of my hour is spent developing rapport with my client and explaining the protocol and making sure they are totally on board with what we're doing. I need to find out what they're willing to do. If I'm going to make a recommendation that they're not going to follow through on, there's no sense in me wasting my breath, right? So, oh, slide didn't load. Uh-oh, we've got a problem here. Houston, we have a problem in that one of my slides didn't load. Let me just see if I can grab it from my file. Okay, just give me a half a second. Technical issue here. That is really weird. I've never had that happen before. I'm just grabbing it now. Got it here. And scroll down to where we're supposed to be. Okay, and we're going to change our screen. We are coming over here. Okay, let's see if this loads. There we go. Okay. So with all of that information, that gives you an idea about Brown. Brown, you're always going to ask questions about liver, right? You need to understand your A&P to understand what the liver does and how it interacts with the other organs to be able to decide what happens next. So our next course start date is November 28th. If you're a health pro and you've got that college level anatomy and physiology with a grade of over 80%, and you are interested in learning iridology at a clinical level, and you want to learn how to think through an iris assessment, not just list one-to-one symptom to marking correlations or one-to-one symptom and remedy correlations. And if you want to study with someone who keeps up with current research, and you want to learn from someone who's been practicing for 45 years and teaching for 40 years, then reach out to me. Let's have a conversation. You've got the URL right there. I'm going to paste that into the chat box for you as well. And if you're into QR codes, you can snap that QR code. It will take you to the same place that URL will take you to. That'll give you a little more information about the course and about what you would learn and about how it's delivered. And if that sounds like it's what you're interested in, then you want to use the link in there that's an invitation for you to have it, schedule a time to chat with me, to talk about the course, to talk about your goals, to talk about iridology, and to see if the course is a good fit for where you're at. Again, only anyone can use the QR code, but the only people to book a time to talk with me about the course need to have anatomy and physiology under the belt. If you don't have A&P, let me know ahead of time and I will send you a link. You can take that course, then we can talk about the iridology course. So with that, my friends, any questions? Now, every time you look at someone's eyes and you see a brown freckle in there, you know that there is an epigene for liver. And if they've got symptoms, and if you know how to do any other kind of assessment, you might see that they are brewing a liver issue. Right. All righty. So with that, thank you so much for being with me tonight. I really appreciate it. So good to have you here. And can you send me a link for the course? Not an ND, but you've got the college level. So Blanca, if you just simply grab the QR code or this link that you see on your screen right here, that will take you to that information. That will give you the the background information about the course. Marie says, thank you for an interesting seminar as always, and lots of thank yous. You are also very welcome. Phyllis says, I love your teaching. Thank you, Phyllis. So good to have you in the course with me right now. With that, my friends, have an amazing, amazing evening. Blanca says, thank you for sharing so much. You are welcome, Blanca. I really look forward to hopefully doing a one-on-one chat with you. Just follow that link and it'll take you to where you can schedule a chat if you are ready to talk about the course. And yeah, we will talk to you again soon, probably next week. Take good care. Have a good evening. Bye for now, everyone.